Hello, everyone. As you probably have gathered by now, we no longer need a team of developers in order to create interactive applications. With the tools that we currently use for design, we are capable of creating a certain level of interactivity that becomes the guideline or the backbone for the full-blown development when it moves on to the developer team. That said, the level of interactivity that is given to us by the applications today allows us to understand the way developers think so that we can design to those specifications and avoid a lot of back and forth with that part of the process. At the same time, it gives us a certain amount of control as to how the application should be from the very beginning, and it helps us focus our vision so that what comes out at the end of the development process matches what we had envisioned. So it's a great way of fitting our jobs as designers within the current workflows for interactive development. So with that in mind, we're going to move on to InDesign for this part of the course. Now, InDesign, as most of you know, if you've ever worked with a program, it's a print media focused program. It's a platform that allows you to create things such as brochures, books, magazines, newspapers, anything that has to do with layout. As such, it's a great tool in order to put things together from the layout perspective, meaning it allows you a lot of creative control and a lot of creative freedom that you can actually realize your designs the way you want them as a designer. As a developer, though, it has limitations. However, it does provide us with the ability to export three types of interactive formats from it. It allows us to export web content, HTML-based web content. It allows us to export what we call interactive PDFs, which have limitations of their own. And then it allows us to create what we call EPUBs. Now, EPUBs are probably out of the three the ones that you're not familiar with. If you're familiar with EPUBs, you know that this is the file format that is used for creating books or magazines or periodicals that are sent to your mobile devices via either broadcast or via download, and that you actually can read in devices such as Kindle for Amazon or iBooks on the Mac. So it is a very common format that is used today widely. Most newspapers and magazines are actually moving their design teams from print onto these platforms because they are less expensive to produce, number one. Number two, because the workflow, it's the most parallel from designing to print as to designing for interactive environments for mobile devices in this case, or for websites. And because of that, there's a very low learning curve in that workflow. So once you open up InDesign, you'll notice that the first thing that you see is you're greeted with what kind of development are you going to be working with. One thing to keep in mind is that if you're working with InDesign for print, your workflow is based on the CMYK premise. That is your color format. For the document will be CMYK, that is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And these are the primary colors when it comes to print media. However, if you're working for interactive, which is what we're going to do, you should switch your color format to RGB. And that is red, green, and blue, which is the color format that is the format for anything that is on screen. Anything that will be seen on a screen or on a mobile device is based on light. Therefore, we have RGB as our primary colors. Now, the program will most likely change that format for you when you decide what file you're trying to create. But it is good to keep an eye on those things as you are creating the projects, as you're working on the base of whatever you're going to be building. So you have some templates here on the screen that are given to you to choose, and these are the most common file formats that are known out there in the market. However, you have the ability to click on Create New, and when clicking on Create New, you will be greeted with a window that gives you a series of templates based on whatever goal you're targeting. So if you're trying to go for print, you can choose from the print menu. If you're going for web, you have a series of options for that as well. And if you're going for mobile, which is what we're going to be doing right now, you click on mobile. Now you might not see as many as I do, but down here you probably will see view more or view all templates. And that's where you will have access to all of these. Now, from this file setup, I am going to be, or from this menu, I am going to choose the iPad 1024 by 768. That's what I want to work with right now. But you'll notice that you also have iPad Retina and all the other sizes. Now notice that it is the sizing is quite different amongst these files, and that will determine the size of the files that you're going to be working with in terms of images when you're bringing those files into the environment, when you're creating artwork that will be displayed within your applications. Keep in mind that 1024 by 768 is still the standard. Anything else is higher, and therefore will require that you have higher resolution images. Also, keep in mind that while you're working for something that will be displayed on screen, your standard should be 72 dpi. That is 72 dots per inch is the standard versus the print standard, which is 300 dpi. So when you're going for print, the files that you bring into InDesign should be at 300 dpi. That is the density of the actual pixels in the image. But if you're working for something that is for print, you will only export at 72 dpi. So you might not need the overhead. However, good practice tells you that if you're going to be working and you don't know what the eventual goal is going to be, meaning you might want to create something that you start with in mind that will be mobile device based, but eventually will turn into something that you print, then you are better off just working at 300 dpi. And when you export the file format will compress the images to 72 dpi anyway. So work with the largest possible dpi for your images in case you see there might be unknown paths that your project will take towards the end of when you're exporting the file. So now with that in mind, I want to choose iPad 1024 by 768. So when I select that, you will notice that my presets change over here. It tells me what the width and the height of the device is. It also gives me an option to see what orientation I want to create, whether I want this to be portrait or vertical, or horizontal or landscape. Now, it also allows me to select how many pages I want to create from the get-go. Pages in InDesign are the same thing as canvases in Photoshop or stages on Adobe Animate or composition windows in After Effects. Basically, is the live area, is the area that you will be working with that will allow you to create what's visible, what people will see when they interact with your application. So now, down below here, you can choose from the get-go how many pages you want to have. You can enumerate or create the amount of the nomenclature for your pages by starting from a specific number if that's something that you need to change. You also have the ability to choose whether you want to have a primary text frame. A primary text frame is a frame of text that will appear on every new page that you create, and they're all linked. So let's say you choose to have 3 pages, each page will have a default text field in it, and all 3 text fields for all 3 pages will be connected so that text can flow from one page to the next one without you having to create extra text boxes. Now, that is something that is useful if you're bringing in a lot of text. So if you're creating a file that has, let's say, for example, a catalog or a brochure or say a schedule of classes or something like that that has a lot of text content, then this becomes extremely handy because by you defining that you want to have a primary text frame, every page that when you import the text, it will create the extra pages for you based on the amount of text that you are importing. So it's a little bit of a time saver technique. I prefer not to have it because most of the time when I'm working on these for devices, I'm usually creating something that is very visual. So I have a lot of buttons, a lot of images, but very little text. So I prefer not to have it, but it's your choice depending on what your workflow will be. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to keep it on just to show you in this instance what it will do. But from that point on up, I am probably going to turn it off. You will also have the ability to choose an amount of columns based on if you want to create a grid before you actually start your page. So if you want to have more than one column on your page to help you design, then you can choose the amount of columns you want and the gutter, which is the space between the columns. It tells you how many pixels you want in between those two. You also have margins. Now, margins are by default 36 pixels. This probably is closed on your interface. Click on the margins title so you open it. The default 36 pixels is given because when you are looking at this EPUBs or the interactive media that you're creating, you're probably going to be using a viewer to see these things. Like I said, the Kindle or the iBooks or whatever device you're using or software you're using to open up the EPUB. That software or device will have an interface of its own. And usually the default is that the window that you have created for your EPUB will be reduced by about 36 pixels all around. That gives the ability for you to have, for example, in ebooks, the ability to go back to your library, or in Kindle, the ability to go back to wherever you have the stack of books that you're reading. So it allows for the software to have a specific area that they can overlap with your application. Now, that is given to you because you want to make sure that you don't put anything that is critical for your navigation or for your content within those 36 pixels. This can be changed to anything, but by default, it comes to 36 pixels. That's what you see as default. If you want to increase it or decrease it, is up to you. Now, let's go now on to bleed and slug. Now, bleed and slug are concepts that we work with when we're working with print media. And a bleed is basically an area outside of your live area, outside of your canvas or outside of your page in this instance, that you need to cut, that where as far as the actual artwork that you want to bleed out of the page, meaning that it will be at the edges of the page, that is how far out it has to go. The reason for that is because when you bleed, and bleeding means you have an object that actually is going to be cut off when you go to print, meaning it's the edge of the page. If you place and if you bump your artwork all the way to the edge of the page, while on the top of the stack of printed materials, it will look just fine. Remember that the printers do not cut the paper one sheet at a time. They actually cut stacks of sheets. They put them under a guillotine, and the guillotine will just go ahead and cut right through, let's say, 1,000 sheets at the same time. Now, the top ones will cut just fine because it's guided by lasers that it will cut at that point. But as the guillotine is pushing on the paper, it creates pressure, and the stack of paper will slide ever so slightly, just pixels, but enough that if you don't have a bleeding amount of image sticking out of the actual live area and outside of the actual page, you will end up with what we call halos, which is basically like a little white line of the paper underneath what you printed. And so that's going to look really sloppy. The pages look like you basically cut them with an X-Acto knife instead of it being a professional print. So you want to avoid that by pushing some of the artwork past the edge of the page. And that's what we call a bleed. Basically that area right outside. It usually equals to about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch. So that's what we have there. But since we're working on interactive media, we're not worrying about bleed at this point. Slug is also an area outside of the bleed where you pass information to the printer, telling them things such as what colors to use, where the registration marks are going to be for the different plates. So when you print, in the print process, you actually have different plates for different colors. So a way for them to match is you create registration marks on each one of them that need to match when you go to the printer area, when you go into the printer. And so that's where that information goes for the printer itself, for the actual person handling the machine, so that they know how to match things. It's a way of passing information to them, and you can determine how much slug area you want outside of the bleed area to communicate with the printer. Less and less do I see people using the slug area in the real workflows today because we have emails. We actually send our files with an email explaining what to do, but it's still being used. A lot of people still use it, so that's why we still have it here. And basically with that in mind, we're going to make sure that we have everything set up the way we want to. We're not worrying about bleeds and slug right now. Margins are set up by default with what they are. I'm going to leave them as they are, and I'm going to simply click create. Now clicking create creates a page for me, and the page is this area. That area that you see as white, that is your live area, your page area. Outside is your pasteboard. So let me zoom out by pressing Control, Alt, and Spacebar on the keyboard. So I'm going to, and this is for the PC, Control Alt and Spacebar, and I'm going to click to zoom out. That is my pasteboard. This whole area here is my pasteboard. You see that this has extra areas here, and that's because I can keep on creating extra pages below this. I can increase the size of my pasteboard if I want to, but for the most intents and purposes, this is more than sufficient. The default is sufficient. Let me zoom in once again. That's your margin, the little purple, those little purple lines or fuchsia lines. You know, if I click over here, you'll notice that they turn blue, and that is my primary text field. You recognize that this is a primary text field by looking at the little icon right here on the right hand side, telling you that you have a text field that is by default on the program, on the page, and that if you were to create extra pages, new text fields will be created, and the text fields on those pages will be connected to this text field. In the left hand side of the screen, you have the tools area. And we're going to be talking about the tools as we progress, the tools that are useful for us, such as, you know, the selection tool, the shapes tools, the gradient tools, and so on. There's a lot of tools here that are specific for print media, and we probably are going to touch on some of those as well as we progress. But for the most part, we're going to focus on those that parallel the workflows that we've seen in Adobe Animate and in Adobe XD. That basically are the same tools. And as you probably have noticed by now, just simply looking at this, you'll notice that most of the tools are tools that you recognize from programs such as Illustrator and Photoshop. So we're starting to see an underlying connectivity across the entire environment, across the entire ecosystem of tools that we have within our design environments. On the right-hand side, we have the properties windows, the pages windows, and the libraries. Now, let's go to the properties windows really quick. Properties are context sensitive, just like, or they're contextual, just like any other properties window in any of the other programs we work with. So right now I have the text field selected. Therefore, all of the properties that you see here reference text field properties, things such as what type of font we're going to use, what size, the alignment of the text, where the alignment of the actual box is with respect to the artboard and all that stuff, the size of it. If I click on the pasteboard somewhere, you'll notice that changes, and now I am talking about the settings for my document, the document itself. When we create this document, we are creating what we call a master page. Now, a master page is basically what defines what this looks like. Compare this to a symbol in Adobe Animate. When we create a symbol, basically the symbol resides in the library, and then we can create instances of that symbol by dragging them onto the stage. So in this case, the master page is what makes this look like it looks like. That's what we created when we said create new a few minutes ago. That's what that is. So how do I create new pages? Well, if I go to the pages window here, you will notice that I have what I'm looking at, which is highlighted here, and that is my page, that is landscape, and it tells me that it's got a little A on top of it, and that's because the A master, which is what we define, was applied to that particular page. So it only follows that if I double click on that A master up here, now I'm looking at the actual master. You'll notice that it is highlighted. You didn't see a change over here, but if you notice down at the bottom of the application, you see that in this little window it says A master. That means I am looking at the master page, the one that is going to determine how my pages will look. So if I go to my pages window and I say I want to create a new page from the drop down, new, and then I'll say new insert pages right here, then it's going to tell me how many pages do I want to insert. Do you want them before or after the page that you currently are on? And what is your underlying master page for that page? So if I say click OK now, you will notice that I have now a new page. If I click on that area here, I see that it has a text field, and the text field is a primary text field. Therefore, it is attached to this text field on page 1. If I scroll up, you'll notice that I now have 2 pages. Now, say for example, I want to have a vertical layout at some point in this application or in this EPUB. How do I do that? Well, for that, you would need to create a new master. And to create a new master, again, you define what any master from now on will be defined by what we created at the very beginning. However, you can change things such as the orientation or having a master text frame or things like that within any new masters that you create within this document. So if I go to the drop down and I choose new master, it's going to tell me, okay, so what do you want in this new master page? First, it'll give it a prefix of B, or you can change that to your liking. You can tell it that it is a master if you want to, or give it a different name. You can choose whether you want it to be based on the properties of the first master or not, if you don't want it. And then you can say how many pages you want to create with this, and the orientation. So let's say I want this to be vertical, like I said. I want it to be vertical, and then I'll simply click OK. You will notice that I've created a new master called B master, but nothing happens down here in the document itself. And that is because I have not created any pages based on that master. Now, you notice that before we created a new page by going Insert, Insert Pages, and we can choose from here which master we want to insert. That's one way to create a page. Another way to create a page is by clicking down here on the little plus icon at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of the menu, sorry. So you click on that and it will create a new page for you. In this case, because we were up here, it created a master. But let's say I just deleted it by having it highlighted and clicking on the trash can. So now let's say, for example, I want to create a new page based on the B master. Okay. The fastest way that you can do this is by simply clicking on the icon for the master and dragging it onto your document. That way you now have 3 pages. The third one of the pages is based on the B master. You can also change an existing layout master by dragging the master onto the page. You'll notice that when I drag it, my page gets highlighted with the little black line around it. That means I am on top of that page, and if I drag that B master, which is vertical, to a horizontal layout, the program is going to tell me, hey, you're about to change the orientation of this. It doesn't match the original. Do you want to resize it, or do you want to keep the size? If I say resize it, notice what happens to page 2. If I use the master layout, notice that my page is now vertical versus horizontal, and you'll notice that it now says B up here instead of A. Now, one of the advantages of having these master pages is that you can apply items or design elements within the master page, and they will be replicated across all the pages that share that particular master. So for example, let's go to Master B, double click it to open it. I need to make sure that I'm on Master B down here. I am on Master B. Let's say, for example, I want to create a rectangle. And this rectangle, let me select the rectangle tool, go to Properties, and I'm going to drag a little rectangle across the top. Let's say that is a banner. I want to change its fill color, and I want to change the color to, let's say, red in this case. And then that's it. I want to use that as the background for a top title banner for each one of the pages in my application. Let me go ahead and click on my select tool to deselect. And you'll notice that when I go back to my pages window, if I double click on page 2, it now contains that banner. Page 3, same thing. So they all contain that particular banner that I added on the master. Now, if I go click and try to move it, it will not work. It will that document, it's part of the master, therefore I cannot remove it. However, if I do have the ability to deselect it and remove it by pressing on the Control Shift key and the Control and Shift keys at the same time, and then clicking on the object that I want to disconnect from the master. So in this case, I am on page 2, and notice that I'm clicking and dragging and nothing happens. But if I press Control plus Shift, keep them pressed, and then click on the object, notice that it gets highlighted and I can remove it from that particular page. You will notice that it's still available on page 3, and it is still available on the master, but no longer on page 2. So I can separate certain elements. It gives me that flexibility to create the layout that I envision for my application and maintaining that specific those specific elements all the way till the actual development of the application. This is really good because what it gives you is, as a designer, it gives you control to maintain the look and feel of what you envision from beginning to end without compromising. And it has its limitations, I won't deny, especially because of the file format. And we're going to be talking about 2 file formats in this semester. We're going to be talking about reflowable layouts and fixed layouts. Reflowable layouts are the ones that when you turn your device around, the content reflows. there's a lot of limitations on that specific file format. And fixed layouts will maintain the look and feel of everything you create exactly as you envisioned it. So nothing will change, because when you export, it will retain the look and feel exactly as you want it to look. So it doesn't matter across many devices, the thing is going to look the same no matter where you're looking at it from. So this is basically the basics of the interface for this program. Next, we're going to be moving into actually creating text fields and importing items in order to create layouts. And then we will move on to adding interactivity into those layouts.